How stinking cute is this little block? Isn't it cute? This is a small or miniature log cabin block, and we're going to make it today. It is a great scrappy project. It's super easy. I know it doesn't look it, but it is super easy. Even though it has a lot of little pieces, you just have to trust me. I broke it down into some really manageable steps, and you can do it. This block was inspired by this old quilt that I picked up at a yard sale. I figured out how the maker made it, and I am bringing that tutorial to you. You can use whatever scraps you have for this. You can use leftover pieces of layer cake, charm packs, or strips. Whatever it is, it's gonna be wonderful. It's gonna be fantastic. But I do have to tell you all of the sizes. And this is something I'm struggling with making this video, because I don't know how to make it less boring than to just read you these sizes and to put them up on the screen. But before I read them to you, I'm gonna show you how this is made. We have the dark side over here. Let me get a better one. Here, I'm gonna get this one. This one's a little bigger because I made a whole bunch of sizes trying to play with it and figure it out. One side of it is dark, one side of it is light. Okay, that's key to this whole block. Also, we use a foundation to build this block, and the foundation size is 6 1/4 inches by 6 1/4 inches. We will also need a center block, which is 1 3/4 inch by 1 3/4 inch. For the light sides, you will need one of each of the following. Again, all 1 inch wide, which I'm going to show you in a minute how to cut really good 1 inch pieces too. So just stay tuned for that. Here's the list: 1 3/4, 2 1/4, 2 3/4, 3 1/4, 3 3/4, 4 1/4. That's of our background or light side of our block. For the dark side or the printed side, you will need these in a 1 inch width: 2 1/4, 2 3/4, 3 1/4, 3 3/4, 4 1/4, 4 3/4. I will put this also in the description so you have the entire list. Our next step is marking our foundation. So let's do it. So let's talk about the background piece of fabric. So this is, like I said, 6 1/4 inches by 6 1/4 inches. And a lot of times we use muslin as a backing or a foundation, but I really like to use something a little thicker. And I get this at Joann's. It's a white on white fabric, and it's definitely got some body to it. I also spray it with spray starch before I cut it, and that also helps with the stiffness. Next, we have to mark this foundation. I usually just use a marking pencil and mark the lines on it, but because I want you to see this, I'm going to use a pen. We're going to start with a ruler. I'm going to line this up so it's 3/4 inch. So 3/4 inch in from the edge. I'm going to make sure that the whole thing is straight, and then I'm drawing a straight line. Did you have one of these pens when you were a kid? I always wanted one. I never got one. All the cool kids had them. And now I'm a cool kid because I can buy them myself. We're just going to mark right down. Again, I usually do this in pencil. Then I'm going to go over and I'm going to mark 3/4 inch from that line that I just drew. Or if you want to go from the edge of the fabric, which I highly recommend because that's going to keep everything straight, you're going to go over 1 1/2 inches and you're going to draw another line. Next, you're going to go over 1/2 inch from the last drawn line, or 2 inches in from the edge. And I'm going to change this to blue. Make sure it's all lined up and draw a line. You can see where we're at. Next, you're going to go in another 1/2 inch or 2 1/2 inches from the edge. Make sure it's all straight and draw a line. Okay, so it will look like this. We're going to do that on every side. So I'm going to turn my fabric. I'm going to go in 3/4 inch. Oh, let me do it in red. Sorry about that. Going to go again 3/4 inch from that last line. Draw another line, then 1/2 inch from that line, it's going to look like that. You're going to keep going all the way around this entire piece. And this is what you're going to end up with. I have one here that I did in pencil. It's a little wrinkled, but that's what you're going to have in the end. And I know you're probably thinking, Chris, you made a mistake. Why do you have wide pieces? Why do you have skinny? Daisy says hi. Why do you have wide pieces? Why do you have skinny pieces? It will all make sense when we start building it. I show you what to do. Before we start building our block, however, I want to just take a minute and show you how I cut these itty bitty tiny little 1-inch wide strips. I have a scrap piece of fabric here. First thing I'm going to do is just even up a side. So we're working with a good straight edge. So for this process, I like to use rulers that have a 1/2 inch edge. So this is a 10.5 inch ruler, and you can see we have 1/2 inch over here. The reason I like to do that is because I like to line up my 1 inch on a dotted line versus a solid line. So if I wanted to do 1 inch, instead of lining it up on, say, this solid line that's 1 inch, like that, I turn it and line it up on the dotted line. It still gives me 1 inch, but it gives me a little bit more accuracy when I cut it. Hope this helps you cutting these itty bitty tiny pieces. Now let's make our log cabin block. So I have my foundation, I have my center square, which we'll talk about in a minute, and I have all of my 1 inch wide strips by the length that I told you to cut, and we're ready to start building. The first thing you're going to do is center this piece, and I want you to see how I have it 1/4 inch about over all of the middle line. So I'm placing this right in the center. If it's easier for you, you can draw 1/4 inch lines on this, which I'm going to actually do. So I just took a heat erase pen and drew 1/4 inch in on all the sides on this little block. Now I can use a heat erase pen on this because it doesn't matter once we get started if it erases. However, on this you need to use either a pencil or a pen because it needs to stay as we build it. And I'm just going to line up those lines as best as possible, making sure it is 1/4 inch over this line here, this intersection, this line, this line, this line, this line, this line, this line. So it's nice and centered. Whoops, just moved it. It's nice and centered in that center square. Now you can put a little bit of glue on that to hold it in place if you want, or a little pin, that's fine to do too. Just line it up. If you're really skilled at knowing where 1/4 inch is, you don't have to mark it at all. The next thing we're going to do is make sure we have something on our machine that tells us where our needle is. So you can see here I have this tape by Cluck Cluck. So it's a seam guide. You can see that here. But you can also use any kind of tape. Here's some washi tape, and you can just peel it off and line it up for that center line. You're going to need to know where that center line is for this block. It'll all make sense in a minute. So our first piece that we're going to add is our smallest. And to do that, we are going to lay this small piece right on top of that center piece that we had just done. And we're going to put this under our needle where that new piece starts. And do you see how I have this line? This is the line we're going to sew on, and it's lined up directly with my line of my needle. I'm going to make sure that it stays on that red line as I sew. And it should look like this. Next, I'm going to take it over to my pressing mat, press it to set that seam, and you don't have to worry about these 1/4 inch marks disappearing because you don't need them anymore. You know you have it centered. Then I'm going to press it like this to the side. And now you have your first piece on. We're going to do our second piece. It's going to also be off-white or beige background. Put it right sides together, and you guessed it, we're going to sew on this line right here. Right there. Let's do it. So I'm lining this line right here, the one that I'm going to sew on that center line. I know that that's where my needle is. I'm going to be watching this as I sew. And that's our second piece. You can see it's a little wonky. That's okay. It's not going to matter. It's all going to even out. I'm going to set that seam, which I forgot to do, press this, and add the next piece, which is one of our printed pieces. Okay, that's all pressed. Now we get to go on to our color pieces. These should be about the right size with a teeny bit of overhang. I'm going to place that on here. You can see my little bit of overhang here. That's okay. Turn this, and you're going to sew on the next line. Now I'm doing this with a camera in my face, so it's always hard to navigate that. There we go. I'm going to set the seam, just press right on top of it, open it, and press towards this way. Okay, this is all pressed. You can see we sewed it like this. I'm going to turn it and sew the next line with my next piece. Laying it on top, lining it up, making sure this line is on this line, it's lined up, and so. Remember, so we started here, I added this piece, then this piece, which are both background, then I went to our prints, print, now I'm going to go background, background, print, print, and keep going all the way around. If you can't remember, always go back to the last one you added. I'm going to lay this here. All right, I'm going to keep going all the way around doing this. And when you're out of pieces, you know you're done. And I'll talk to you about exactly how this all comes together after that. Now you can see here, because these are a little bit oversized, this isn't a perfect process. I did have to come over a little bit to make sure that I have a 1/4 inch beyond that red line here. If I went too far, my next piece will not line up well. So you always have to keep in mind that you want to only be a 1/4 inch over that line. If it's difficult, you can always mark a 1/4 inch over on each of these so you know where your edge needs to line up. Okay, our last piece. Okay, here it is. It is all lined up, almost. I have a little piece over here, which is fine, but you want it to be 3/4 of an inch from the edge. That's going to be our cut line. We're going to cut this down to, I know it's a weird size, 4 3/4. Before I do that though, I'm going to baste this down. You can just use some glue if you want, but you want it to stay put on that foundation somehow. So that's with some glue. I'll show you how to baste it. I just changed my stitch length to like a 5, so it's nice and big. Actually, 5's as high as it goes. Perfect. And I'm just gonna sew around the edge. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just gonna give us a nice basting stitch to hold it still. And we can take these out afterwards, so it's not a problem. I'm going to give this a really good press, and I'll show you the next step. Here's the block we just sewed, and we're going to cut this down to 4 3/4 square. I'm going to take a square that is a little bit bigger than my block, and I want to get 2 good edges. So I'm going to measure over 3/4 of an inch because that's what our edge should be. Remember, you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance in here when you sew these together. These in here are 1/2 inch wide, but this one over here is 3/4. So I'm going to line that up. That's going to give me my first straight edge. I'm going to turn this, and I'm going to do the same thing here, but this time I'm going to line up a line on the ruler, making sure that's straight, and also look at my 3/4 of an inch on the side. Now I know I have 2 sides that are square, and like I said, you can see I was a little off here. That's not going to be a big deal though when we sew it together. Don't worry about it because you still have that foundation. It'll be lost in the seam allowance. I'm going to go over here, line everything up here and here, making sure I'm 3/4 of an inch in, making sure everything is straight. and cut. I'm going to do the same here. And now you have 4 3/4 by 4 3/4 inch square. Now to put these together, you can make all kinds of designs with a log cabin block. And here's some that I have made. Pull that down so you can see. And again, there's just a million different designs that you can make. You can do something like that. Like that. You could do, let's see if I can figure it out. Something like that. You're just going to assemble them just like you would regular blocks. You put them right sides together and sew a 1/4 inch down, just like you would normally. It is a little thicker, so if you're planning on machine quilting, it's not going to be a problem, but if you are planning on hand quilting, it's a little tough to get through both layers. Aren't these so cute? They're so much fun to make. This would be a great project if you, say, just wanted something to sew. You could even have like a stack of these by your machine and just as a warm-up or whatever, because they're so much fun to make and they're just so tiny and adorable. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you take some time to sew, and I will see you real soon. Oh, I forgot one more thing. I will be doing a Lessons from an Old Quilt on our inspiration quilt, and that should be out like on July 24th, 2023, in a few days, I'd say at the latest. And I'll definitely tag that video below. Bye.